great. So see, I'm a software engineer. I'm really bad with hardware. So let's start. Let's start again. So this talk will be about branching and continuous integration. And how many of you have seen the previous talk about Jenkins at 3 years, where something is not right? Again, so how many of you seen the previous talk, Jenkins at 2 years, where Kashuka kind of mentioned multi-branch plugin? So good, pretty much many of you. So this is unfortunate, and our talks will a bit collide on that topic, but I will be doing a different approach. So what we want to discuss today is the general idea of how continuous integration and branching in your version control system, they basically conflict at some point. And, well, yeah, that would be the approach of this talk. So if you've been there, don't worry. Still, I hope this will be useful for you at some level. So my name is Oleg. I'm from Zero Turnaround. And I would like to thank them for sending me here to talk to all of you, like awesome people. So if you have interest, you can find us at the expo floor later. So now, I'm a software engineer. I have been for like 7 years, so I have experience in all kinds of online system, online gaming solutions, and now I'm doing product tools for Java people, which means that I've seen different scenarios where you need to employ continuous integration systems for different kinds of projects. So my setup for this talk would be obviously Jenkins. Obviously for Java people that would be Maven as a build tool. And my demos and my setup is based on Mercurial. But if you use something like Git or maybe Subversion, how many of you use Subversion? Good, not that many of you. So basically branches in Git and Mercurial are kind of similar, different in the notion, but the effect on the continuous integration is similar. So we could do that. So the setup would be appropriate for you too. So let's start. Why do we love continuous integration? Why do we employ that anyway? So the main idea, we want to be able to monitor our product. We monitor our software all the time. And we see how it evolves. We see how healthy it is. We know where the bugs are. We validate all our assumptions about design of the system. So does it run in a certain environment? Do the components work together well, right? So, and the whole idea is that we want to reduce time to market because we don't want to hunt all those little problems individually, but we run all our tests in a single loop all the time on the latest version of software of our product, and we see how it does, right? So any changes that we do in the version control system will be automatically picked up, tested, and stuff, right? So now it goes a bit like this, right? So we check out, we create a branch. Why? Because we want to create a branch and talk about branches. Then we develop again, ready to commit our changes. But then we need somehow to integrate this isolated branch into mainline, right? Into master. And then we have a problem of merge. So problem of mergers is a really fundamental one, and we will talk a bit about mergers. But during this talk, I won't tell you the magic solution how to avoid mergers altogether. Well, I hinted at one, but not really appropriate. But after that, we need to update all the stuff and integrate this branch into mainline, right? And now we have a problem. So we have tons of people working on the same code base, and it will create tons of merge conflicts. And this is not a situation where we want to be. But we cannot avoid mergers if you have several people working on the same code. Anyway, there will be conflicts. You will need to solve them manually, right? But the different problem, more appropriate for this talk, is that continuous integration wants you to always test your latest changes that you did to your software, right? And any branch, when you use a branch, it wants to be isolated to the maximum, right? You don't want your work in progress influence other people working on the main line, working on master. That's why you created that branch, right? So, and this is a different problem, and that is what we want to try to solve in this talk, right? So, yes. Now, a obvious conflict of interest is that if you employ branches, you majorly reduce all the benefits that you get from continuous integration, because either you don't test all your branches, or you, well, the problem is that in the solution, you want to test all your branches and you want to test integration of those branches all together in the same manner as you would do with the usual workflow, right? So a workaround for this branching problem is just to do as one quite large company does, and basically you make all your engineers work on master, right? That's why you still have merge conflicts, but you don't have branches. You restrict that with your process, and you don't have problem of conflict of interest, which is not the best solution because we love branches. Who loves branches? So there are several reasons why people usually use branches. So first one is that you want to implement some new feature or refactor some different feature in isolation without disrupting other people's work. Or you can just build your whole workflow with small, like, sort of throwaway branches and stuff like that. So without branches, your workflow will be easier. You'll just have a tiny merge, but it's not the point. That's a workaround. Another workaround would be to branch by obstruction. You still work on the same code base. You still work in one version control system branch, but you do feature flags, and you don't allow your software to actually execute the new code before you enable that specifically, right? So this is also a workaround which is not directly appropriate for any solution, for any setup, right? So let's go into proper use of branches with continuous integration. So a simple use case would be when you have no dependencies between your projects, right? So we have a single project. It is quite large, maybe, and you branch only in there. So you don't have additional sub-project somewhere in the code base that you maintain and that you want to also integrate into your main one. So that project has several branches, and the only problem that you encounter in that case with using continuous integration, you need to somehow merge the branches into a main line, right? You can do that manually at the end of feature branch, but that nullifies the point of continuous integration, as we talked before. So we need somehow to avoid those mergers. So if you've seen the talk before, Koshuk mentioned the multi-branch plugin. What it does, you create a multi-branch project, and it can create the children jobs for every branch that it encounters in your code, and then it runs your test suites on all the branches. There are different trade-offs about that approach. So, for example, when do you stop testing that branch? How do you delete all those sub-jobs and stuff like that? But it's definitely a major valid approach. But I would want to talk about how to implement something like that using open source and available tools, how to implement that yourself, and then you will probably better understand the problem of how branches work and how you want them work with your continuous integration system, right? So let's discard for a moment this out-of-the-box solution for that. So there is a different continuous integration server called Bamboo, and they have a feature called plan branches. So in Bamboo integration server, a plan is a description of several jobs that you want to run in different stages. So what you have to, what the useful notions that they have is two concepts. Branch updater, this is a component that is responsible for integrating and pulling changes from the default, from the master into a branch before you run the test suite. And they have a gatekeeper, which does the opposite. It takes the changes that it merged from the default into your branch. It takes all the changes that you created on your branch individually, and then at the end of the test suite, if everything is fine, it will push those back to mainline, right? So, and as you can see on the picture, you have a couple of lines, mainline and a feature, and when you check out, merge, run tests, and if everything is green and nice, you can push those changes back to all your branches, but basically to both branches. That approach actually solves the problem of having different branches in your setup. So first, it integrates your default branch into your custom isolated one, then it runs your tests, then it pushes back into all the branches affected, right? So you still run all your tests on all the branches, and you still integrate often. And obviously, if there is a merge conflict, you need to solve it manually. But as we talked, like, you always need to solve merge conflicts manually. There is no other way around it, right? So this is a good thing, and we will try to reproduce something like that in the Jenkins environment. We have a question.
Where do you recommend that you solve that merge problem? Do you solve it on the feature branch, mainline, on the plan branch?
So I would recommend, there are a couple of things where this approach could fail, right? So if it fails on test, obviously you need to fix test. If it fails on a merge from default to your branch, when the first one that branch updater does, then what you need to do, I would recommend that you, as a branch is an isolated thing, and default should be should consist on all the tested changes that are appropriate to be pushed into production or whatever at any moment of time, mostly, right? I would recommend to solve that merge conflict, go into your branch, merge that manually, solve that conflict, so you will still have all the changes that are in your branch, but the next merge will be trivial, and it will be automatically the stage where a branch updater pulls changes into a branch from default will be automatically passed because you just did that merge.
So you resolve the problem on the feature branch?
Yeah. And you do that. Obviously, you can change your default to accommodate the fact that merge fails. But the whole idea is that you want to keep only tested changes that that came through the same approach from all the branches. And if you want to solve that conflict on the default, you need to merge from a branch manually into default, right? And then to push to somewhere for the test suite to run. And this is not what you want to do. You want to integrate your branch only when you are sure that your test suite is passing.
When you merge back to mainline, do you need to test again?
That's a good question. Basically, I would say it depends. So usually, if this cycle will pass without any additional changes from default, you don't need to test again. But if there are some individual commits to the default before, then probably those commits will need to start to trigger the test suite again anyway. So this is not exactly a problem.
You can't prevent people from pushing the mainline.
Yes, you can.
Let's discuss maybe that in a bit later. So we want to introduce this concept into our Jenkins environment, right? So first thing, it is also kind of workaround, but it's a cool thing that we have a Jenkins AutoJobs thing made by Georgie. So it's not a plugin for Jenkins per se, but the whole idea is that you can recreate jobs automatically. So you have a test suite that runs on your main line, you create a branch, you start the AutoJobs script, and it copies all the jobs on your main line into a branch line, right? And after that, you create manually jobs that will push stuff to main. This is a cool plugin. We were using that at some point of time in zero turnaround. one major drawback, actually there are two major drawbacks. First, when you copy the whole test suite for your branch, and naturally it's really easy to do that once that's automated and scripted, amount of jobs in your Jenkins environment can drastically grow. And because that is easy to do, that would be abused. Naturally, anything that is easy to do will be abused. So, and we were left with tons of jobs that were not relevant anymore. And it's really not easy to delete all of them manually, right? So, but this is the thing to consider when you want just to create a different branch. So maybe if you divide your product into a couple of versions, like probably stable and development, so then you want to recreate all the branches, that is the way to go, I would say. Now, there is the different plugin, which actually Jenkins built for branch plugin is a more sophisticated one. So AutoJobs worked on Git, Mercurial, and Subversion. This one works currently only on Git, I guess. So if there are any Mercurial fans, this is an open source effort. You can probably look into improving that. But what it does for you, it still copies jobs for different branches, but it does that automatically. So you specify some template, which will be the jobs that on your main line. You specify a different Jenkins job to copy that, and you specify your repository, and this plugin and that job will recreate jobs automatically for you. This will solve the problem when you don't need to manually remove all those jobs, because it will run periodically, it will pull the list of branches from your the repository, it will create different jobs for those branches based on the template, and if it doesn't find a branch anymore, it will remove all those created jobs for that. So if you use Git, I would recommend using that instead of AutoJobs in Git. Right? And well, basically, obviously, you can do the old scripting approach, so you just write scripts to mimic a branch updater and gatekeeper yourself, and you will need to introduce different jobs also manually. Really annoying thing to do stuff manually, because you will make mistakes, you will forget something. So, but the general thing is that branch updater and gatekeeper would be, in the end, solution that I'll present would be implemented more or less manually with a script anyway. But you can do all things with scripts, but that's not the point. So now we're coming to a feature branch notifier plugin, which would play a central role in this session.
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah.
If you have a build pipeline on your master, if you have this automatic creation of job when you do a branch, does it also create the other build pipeline for the branch itself? Example, you have this master job, right? Then after this job, you do the deployment, then run the test, another job. Does it do also those build pipeline for the branch itself?
You specify the whole template and say, I want those jobs to be copied, and the configuration of those jobs will be copied except for their source control management URL, which will point to a different branch. So if you have a pipeline and you copy that with build for branch plugin or with AutoJobs, everything else, still those jobs will be in the pipeline, right? So you maybe need to add a different view in your Jenkins, like a pipeline view, but you just add all those jobs and jobs will be connected automatically. If that
how
was.
are you going to link the branch job to a certain, other job, same as the master build flow?
If you just copy the configuration, then you can.
Yeah, so you will be linked on the master. Yeah, that's example.
If it's just a copy of the configuration.
Yeah.
So the whole idea is that you copy configuration and you change the question was how do you
Yeah, example.
if you copy jobs, why your jobs in a pipeline point to a different location?
Yeah, example, you have a master job, right? Then
Yeah.
after that master job, a flow of, let's say, deployment on dev, right? Or something. Then after that, you deploy it, you do the test,
Yep.
right? There are some names of jobs. Then on your automated job, when you create a branch, it creates based on the template of master, right?
Yep.
But inside of the template, there's a link that which job are you going to point to? So are you going to link that one? If you're just going to copy each template from the master itself.
So the build history actually
Well,
says which branch it's
You,
building on.
you copy the whole tree and we re-establish the structure.
No, but if you copy the configuration file, like the XML, what's going to happen is like the second job is
Well, the plugin is smart enough. So if it points to another template job, you will copy the template job and like update the link to a new job. So I think. But there is different approach. So that before we copied jobs to run, and we had different branches, and for every branch we create a different job, which is appropriate solution, but maybe not the best way to establish that. So how you want to think of a continuous integration with a branch, you want a single job that is able to run on all your branches, right? So which is basically the same view from, like, you have this whole test on different branches, but you want one job, one central configuration to handle that. So and there is this feature branch notifier plugin made by Trinis, who's my colleague. And what it does, currently this one supports only Mercurial, so Git fans, this is also open source, you can maybe provide some effort, and if you like that, improve that to run on Git too. So what it does, it integrates with Mercurial plugin for Jenkins. It creates a different polling strategy to actually go and look into the branches, and then it creates a different trigger to run the job. And so when a branch is updated, this feature branch notifier plugin checks which branch has new commits and just executes the whole test suite on that branch. So, which is kind of much better than having like tons of jobs wandering around your Jenkins installation that actually copy the whole configuration.
How do you keep the different results apart? Because, you know, a developed branch might be a different result priority than your main branch. Because the dev might break more often than the main, but you're more interested that the main stays green, whereas the dev, you know, you have breakages over the time.
Yeah, so the question is how to prioritize which results of the test jobs to keep. Actually, that doesn't think about that whatsoever. So my approach would be to publish artifacts of failed jobs somewhere into like larger repository, so you'll be able to access those. But this solution treats all the branches equally. So. But still, what it does for you, it polls and automatically figures what branches are in action. It runs, it figures out which branches has recent commits and which branches should be tested, and it runs different builds of the same job for branches that were affected, right? So yeah, and as a thank you note, I want to thank Tinis because they hold this talk drew out of his bachelor thesis at the University of Turkey. So I'll provide a link somewhere in the slides later, but it has the whole text and like not proofs, but the valid triggers description of those branch updaters and stuff. So a feature branch notifier your build history will look something like that, really useful to see. So it integrates with Jenkins on different layers, and you can see that build history will contain all the results of all tests. Well, obviously up to the point when you don't store that many test runs, and then maybe the development branch will overwrite all the stable branches. So.
I'd like to understand what the difference between this and putting ** in the branch specifier in the SCM plugin.
In which plugin?
So for example, in the Git plugin, you can say I want to. There is a branch text box somewhere, and you can say I want to build only the master branch.
Yep.
Or you can say star or star, I think. And in this case, it builds commits when it sees commits on all branches. So I'd like to know what the difference is between the thing you're presenting and what
Git plugin. So that's a good question. I'm not sure about the Git plugin and how Git plugin handles different branches. Probably it's kind of the same approach.
so maybe you think that what you did is for Mercurial.
So that is for Mercurial. Maybe Git plugin in Jenkins has something like that. But the thing is that actually that plugin provides a bit more integrations with different stuff, and it provides a view that will come useful a bit later. But maybe for Git plugin out of the box works with no dependency solution pretty well. So how will you solve now no dependency problem? So the problem was, let me repeat, it was that we have one main project. We want to have different branches of those. We want to integrate them often. We want to run all the tests on all the branches to see the status. So what we do, we install feature branch notifier to handle all the branches and handle the job running on different branches. And we implement branch updater and gatekeeper by scripts, right? So somewhere here should be a demo, but I'm not sure how to handle the screens, and I'm running a bit out of time, so we'll push demos back to the back of the presentation. But what I would show you a project which has the different branches and the feature branch notifier plugin in the Jenkins installation, and I will show that when I push the branch, it actually picks it up, builds artifact, contains code from the branch, and the view plugin will be updated with a build on that branch. So now we are going to multiple dependencies scenario, which is more common, but is also more complicated. So merges obviously are still a problem, and we still have a conflict of interest of integrating often versus being isolated. But also we have an artifact propagation problem for test purposes. So imagine you have a distributed build, you have different nodes. Probably your branch doesn't, a different branch in the project doesn't include changes to the build number or to the version, because you just created that branch and you want to keep that isolated on the code level. But if you take that artifact and you push that to your artifact repository without any changes, you will get that two different builds will override each other, right? So when you have dependencies between your projects, between your test jobs, how do you ensure that the job that consumes the result of the previous job actually runs on the same branch of the project, and how do you ensure that it consumes the right artifact? So imagine you have two projects. You have a main project and a dependency, right? And you create a branch called urgent fix, and you obviously create that in both of those projects because you want to push code into both of them. You want to change them simultaneously, right? Now, with no dependency solution, you had one project to care about. That was easy. Now you want to build your dependency sub-component. You want to test that, and then you want to build your main component in a way that it consumes the result. First, it should run on the same branch, on the urgent fix branch, and second, it should consume the dependency that was created in the run on a branch in the dependency, right? So the whole point is to avoid the situation when you run a different job on a default branch and that will override some dependency in your artifact repository. So now we'll have a bunch of plugins that you can combine together in a semi-automatic solution to use that. So with throttle concurrent build plugins, which limits a number of parallel execution of a job, which will be really helpful. Now we have a Jenkins Multijob plugin, which is a really cool thing in itself. So even if you don't have any branches, that is a cool plugin to look into. What it does, it kind of imitates what is a plan in Bamboo. So it has phases and different jobs. So phases run sequentially. So you can have a phase to build something, then you have a phase to test something, and release something or upload. You have 3 phases that will run sequentially, and you have in every phase you can have multiple jobs that will run in parallel. So what you can probably build will be one job, but test will be parallelized into different jobs, and they will run all together concurrently, but the next phase will be executed only when the previous one is fully done. So you can have your UI tests, you have your acceptance and integration tests, different jobs, but you combine them into one testing phase and you're done. So this would be the second important thing for branching solution. So
Is that same as the Jobs DSL plugin, or is that?
jobs, sorry?
Is that same as the Jobs DSL plugin, or is that different?
I'm not sure.
That one where you kind of define this, like the little syntax saying these are parallel, these are sequential.
Well, in a sense, probably yes. I'm not. So there is a Jobs DSL plugin that probably you can supply some syntax and describe which runs in parallel or not. So in a sense, probably yes, because this does the same separation of sequential phases and parallel subjobs, but that is better. So the whole thing would be looking like that. So feature branch notifier will manage branches in our solution. Multijob plugin will manage job dependencies in between. The cool thing is about feature branch notifier is that it actually is multijob plugin aware. So if it sits inside a multijob, it will find out that something is changed in a repository. It will not start itself, but it will propagate up to the topmost multijob it sits inside it and run that. So if you have a change in your, not in your dependency project, but in your main one, it will still propagate to the beginning and run the whole multi-job. So that is probably one feature that the plugin is not certainly aware of.
So do the jobs managed by the multi-job plugin, do they each require an executor? So
yes.
Parallel,
yes. So multi-job plugin will just it orchestrates the execution of jobs, right? So these sub-jobs will be proper jobs that are configured as usual Jenkins jobs, and you just refer to them at this point of time, I want to run that job. The coolest thing is that sub-jobs of a multi-job plugin could be also multi-jobs. So you can build the full hierarchy of multi-jobs, which will come very handy. And now we need to throttle concurrent builds to actually keep things from breaking, and we probably need to, what we need to do, we need to limit the execution of this multi-job to one job at a time and at a node, because we don't want a local main wrapper to be overridden with different artifacts from different branches, right? So one job, it will run, it will populate artifacts and branches into your local main repository, and then the next job will consume those artifacts, right? And throttle concurrent builds will ensure that no other multi-job will be executed at that, no other build of this multi-job will be executed at that node, so nothing will override information in your version control system, in your artifact repository. So, as I said, feature branch notifier in multi-job plugin work pretty well together, and the whole multi-job plugin will get a branch environment variable that will be propagated through the whole build. So now we have a demo.
Quick question.
Let's have a question first.
With the, you're going to elaborate links to avoid having your artifacts get stepped on by branch artifacts. Why don't you just require that your feature branches use a unique version number?
Well, you certainly can do that. So the question is, why do we want to mess with this artifact propagation thing and not just take our branch and say, okay, all the artifacts of this branch will have a new, like, I don't know, branch prefix. All the versions on the branch will have branch prefix. You certainly can do that, but that is not as easy implementable automatically. So you create a branch in different projects. You need to remember that you need to rename all the versioning there. When you will integrate those branches, imagine you will have conflicts in your POM XML, for example, because versions will change on all the branches, and then will be conflict, which is really annoying and not a smart one, because that is something automatic and artificially introduced into your build pipeline. So a demo. I have like 4 minutes, but let me try to. So. I'll start at Jenkins and can you see that? So Jenkins fully up and running, and it will start. So the picture will look something like that. So I have a multiple dependencies example, which is really simple one, a small one. Show you. So it will look like something like that. So I have a multi-job. I have several phases of that. So build all will actually build my dependencies, build my dependency in separate phases. Then I have an integration test phase which will run tests on the main project, right? So your submodules can have their own test suites, but in the project you want to run test against the whole build solution. And then you run the gatekeepers. You also run gatekeepers which are scripted, and you run them automatically at the end of the multi-job. So one thing to note is that you want your checkout phase and your gatekeepers to run on a single node, because you don't want to check out additional stuff from default back to your branch after the job execution, because your test it could take quite some time. So the whole solution for multi-job with branches will look like that. And you can see that the build will have either no branch tag in the view or some branch tag, right? So, and I have really like just 1 minute, so let's go back to that. So now the whole thing can run, but that is not enough usually, because what you want to do, you want to be able to rerun stuff with the same artifacts, right? To reproduce stuff and stuff like that, and you want to be able to get archives from the test, exactly what you asked before. So the answer to those is that it will require more work to set it up. So to get archives from the test runs, I would suggest that you publish them to some artifact repository. You can do that with some, not modifier, with some tag or some property value that says, okay, that was the development build. Which is a cool thing, because actually if you have the artifact that passes everything, and it actually passes everything further and further away, at some point of time you want to promote that into release. Something like Artifactory does for you. So anyway, you want to store those artifacts and results anyway. And for rerunning tests with the same archives, I would suggest to install a rebuild plugin, which will integrate with the jobs and allow them to run with the same parameters names that were. So you will get a revision name, and you basically can rerun the whole suite with the same parameters as you did before. And you customize the things even further using build name setter plugin, right? So all in all, you can build a semi-automatic solution for to handle your branches and handle your test suites together. I'm not aware of out-of-the-box solution for testing multiple branches of, multiple dependency components to solving that problem right now. So if anyone knows that, I'm open to learning new stuff. But something like that with a bunch of like open source plugins and fiddling them together, you can build one pipeline that works, and then you will easily copy that into different projects. So fiddle once, run anywhere, let's say. Yeah, so that's it. I hope that technical problems didn't affect that much. So that's it. I guess I need to empty this place. But if you have more questions, I'm available there in the expo floor. Come talk to us.